Hello, everyone. We are now live on YouTube.
Thank you, Pat. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Jessica Snyder, the hearings officer for this evening's hearing. It is now 6 o'clock, but I'm just going to give just a couple of more minutes for people to get logged in and make sure that everybody can hear us from the start, if that is okay with you folks. Good evening. I think everybody that was going to log in at 6 is getting logged in. Again, my name is Jessica Snyder, and I will be the hearings officer for this evening. Also with us are Eileen Rice, the Fisheries Division Administrator, Don Scarr, the Fisheries Habit and Access Bureau Chief, Travis Horton, the Regional Fisheries Manager, Cheryl Morris, the Regional River Recreational Manager, and Kim Weddy is also regulating the unmuting and muting of folks during the question, answers, and public comment period. We also have Commissioner Stuker and Byorth joining us this evening. This hearing is being recorded and is also being broadcast live on YouTube. Right now, our numbers are within a healthy range for Zoom, but if all of a sudden we get a bombardment of people, Zoom caps the number of participants. So if you wish to just listen to the hearing, we may ask you to do so on YouTube so that the people who wish to provide comment may access the Zoom hearing. But as I said, right now, we aren't even approaching that cap, but I just wanted to give a warning about that. Comment provided during this hearing will bear the same weight as any written comment that may have already been received. So if you feel like you have provided a written comment, you are not obligated at all to provide verbal comment. Also during hearings, forms are typically available in the back of the hearing room, but in the current environment we're all working in, we're not all in the same room. So if you wish to receive notice about administrative rules, that does not include the fishing regulations or hunting regulations. That's strictly the administrative rules, such as the ones being proposed currently. You can do so by sending the request to me at the address in paragraph 2 in the rule notice. The page is actually numbered 1722, but it's paragraph 2 of the rule notice. This evening's hearing will start out with the presentation of the rule proposal and environmental assessment done by the fisheries staff. They'll just overview what is contained in those documents. We will then open it up for the question and answer period. After the question and answer period, there will be time for the public comment, and we will close the hearing. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eileen Rice to start the presentation on the rule proposal in EA.
Thank you, Jessica. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I'm gonna start with a brief background and a little bit of history on the process that we've gone through for river recreation management on the Madison. As Jessica mentioned, I will give details on the rule proposal, and then I'll hand it over to Don Scarr to cover more information on the environmental assessment. We do encourage questions. We will take those after Don is finished with his presentation. So to get started, the purpose of the rule and environmental assessment is to address recreation management on the Madison River from the outlet of Quake Lake downstream to its confluence with the Jefferson River near the city of Three Forks. Using the language as provided by 2 rulemaking petitions, one that was received from the Fishing Outfitters Association of Montana, and the other from the George Grant chapter of Trout Unlimited, Skyline Sportsman Association, and the Anaconda Sportsman Association. The Fish and Wildlife Commission approved this rulemaking process with a desire to hear from the public on the options presented in the 2 petitions. The process excludes the Bear Trap Wilderness Area which is managed exclusively by the Bureau of Land Management. The Madison River is an iconic fishing destination for trout anglers worldwide. The popularity of this fishery is documented through angling pressure estimates, which indicate the Madison is the most fished river in the state. Because of the heavy use on the river, there have been many efforts over the past several decades to address angler conflict and crowding on the river. Most recently, in 2018, the Commission directed the department to establish a process for recreation rulemaking for the Madison after the Commission voted against releasing an environmental assessment and rule for public comment. The Commission decided to adopt negotiated rulemaking, which failed to reach consensus. After the failed negotiated rulemaking, the Commission received 3 petitions for rulemaking. The Commission did not adopt the petitions and instead directed FWP to conduct public scoping in order to narrow down options for consideration in a recreation management rule. As part of the scoping effort, the Commission wanted input from the public on a Madison River recreation goal. The Madison River recreation goal was established as managing recreation in a manner that, 1, ensures long-term health and sustainability of the fishery, 2, diversifies angling opportunity while reducing conflict, and 3, sustaining the ecological and economic benefits of the river. In August of this year, the 2 rulemaking petitions were presented to the Commission, and the Commission voted in favor of proceeding with the rulemaking process. I will give a brief overview of the rule, and Don Scar will give an overview of the environmental assessment. Our intent tonight is to help the public make the best informed comments as possible, and we welcome questions for clarification after our presentation. So on the rule was drafted to combine components from both petitions. Some components may appear contradictory because the 2 petitions offer different possible solutions. In new Rule 1, commercial use is capped at 2019 levels. This was proposed in the GGTU, George Grant Chapter of Trout Unlimited, and the Sportsman petition. In new Rule 6, which has language from the FOAM petition, the Fishing Outfitters Association of Montana petition, which sets the commercial cap at either 2019 or 2020 levels, depending on which year was the highest for the individual outfitters. New Rule 2 provides an option for 2 days of rest rotation from June 15th to September 30th. Rest rotation limits commercial activity on certain days and in certain sections as proposed in the GGTU and Sportsman petition. New Rule 3, also from the GGTU petition, proposes an option for a walk wade section. From June 15th to September 30th, this would limit where watercraft can be used to access fishing. New Rule 5 offers another alternative for walk wade as proposed in the FOAM petition. New Rule 5 addresses fishing from vessels and not the use of watercraft to access fishing. The sections and seasonality also differ between New Rule 3 and 5. New Rule 4, also from the GGTU petition, addresses development of new access acquisitions below Grey Cliff Fishing Access Site to maintain the primitive nature of this section of river. New Rule 6 is from the FOAM petition and provides specifics for allocation of commercial trips. In addition to allowing the outfitters to choose their cap from either 2019 or 2020 use numbers, it also allows for a petition process, flex trips, a trip pool, and specifies that rest rotation will not be considered until at least the third year of plan evaluation. New Rule 7, also from the foam petition, addresses the transferability of permits, and New Rule 8 provides more specifics on flex trips, which includes 10 flex trips to each permit holder that can be used 2 out of 3 consecutive years. More details on transferability of trips is provided in New Rule 9, and that is also from the foam petition. New Rule 10 addresses reductions in trips according to a system of tiers, and this also comes from the foam petition. The trip reduction system will allow for forfeited trips to be made available through the distribution pool as established in New Rule 15. Annual reporting, permit application, and fees are addressed in New Rule 11 and 12. New Rule 13 and 14 are also from the foam petition and allows for plan evaluation and establishment of a commercial use working group. Finally, New Rule 16 is from language contained in both petitions and would establish a Madison River use stamp, which would be unlimited and at no cost. The concept of the stamp would be to use it in order to gain more information on the non-commercial use of the river. Those are the main components of the rule. The environmental assessment goes through each of these components in more detail, analyzing impacts to recreation, the physical environment, natural resources, heritage resources, and economic values. The EA considers each of the rule components in terms of how they relate to the Madison River recreation goal. We're covering a lot of details between the rule and the EA. And as I mentioned, we are happy to address questions after our presentation to aid with clarification. So with that, I will now hand it over to Don Scar to cover more details on the environmental assessment.
Thank you, Eileen. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, I will go over the environmental assessment now. Pretty much give highlights of what is in the EA and summarize the results and the analysis we went through and some of the thinking and reasoning behind that. So I'm going to share the EA itself, hopefully without any problem here. There we go. Whoop. So,
hey, Kim, can you please make a co-host?
oh.
Thank you, folks, for your patience while we figure out all the technical ins and outs.
Well, okay. Okay. Thank you, Pat, for helping me with that. So here's the EA. I'm just going to cursor through this and point out important parts of the EA that you all might want to concentrate on as you make your comments. Go over the executive summary later. I want to move to the table of contents here first. Purpose and need. Eileen's already gone over that. And I'll spend a fair amount of time talking about the river use and public scoping. And we feel that's pretty important. It's key to the reader understanding the existing level and nature of the public and commercial use on the river, as well as the preferences and sentiments of the users. So that I'll come back to that. With regard to the management alternatives, again, as Eileen pointed out, we're only looking at the petitions. This is the only thing we analyze here against the status quo or no action, rather than any other alternative that could functionally do the same thing. Then lastly, if you go down here to the sorry, everyone. The resource areas, as Eileen said, then we look at the effect of each alternative on recreational values, physical environment, natural resources, heritage resources, and economic resources. And so starting off, let's just work through some of this in terms of the public use and public scoping. Go down here to figure 1. As Eileen pointed out, this map can be very helpful, showing the major fishing access sites as well as the full scope of the area we're looking at. That is from the outlet of Quake Lake down to the Jefferson River. And accepted from this is the Bear Trap wilderness area. That is not considered as part of this plan. In terms of the use on the river, figures 2 and 3 talk about angler use on the river, in the upper river and lower river over the years, how that has increased quite dramatically in recent years. I do have a little bit of new information to share with you. We've just recently got our preliminary numbers for angler use on the upper river and lower river in 2019. The upper Madison River in 2019 actually had a slight decrease in use, down to about 173,000 angler days. Then if you go down here to figure 3, that shows angler days on the lower river. That showed a decrease to right around 60,000 days. So between 17 and 19, we did see some slight decrease in angler pressure. So continuing down, table 1 and table 2 were put in here to try to get some, give the reader some idea of the amount of use on the upper and lower river from non-anglers. We don't have a real good handle on that. These are mainly based on traffic counters at established access sites. Table 2, basically, we don't know really how many, visitors to an access site by traffic counter, how that equates to an angler day. So all we did is show a ratio here of those two methods of calculating use, just showing how visitors on the upper river much more heavily dominated by anglers than they are by non-anglers. So a lot of that, the non-angling public is on the lower Madison. They'll be subject of the Madison River stamp, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Table 3 is important, shows commercial activity by month and by year. And this information is also then summarized down below here in figures 4 and 5, which shows the seasonality over the different years for commercial use on both the upper river and lower river. Upper river, of course, you see mainly is highest in July and August. Lower river here has a little bit of its highest a little bit more toward the shoulders in June and September, a little bit of a dip during the warm water months in July and August. In terms of, so that uses information for us interpreting these different alternatives and the resource conditions. The next part of our analysis tools is the public surveys, public opinion that we took. Table 5 is basically the 2016 mail survey of 2,921 respondents. And basically, this shows people were asked these questions. You can see them on the left, and they were asked to respond how acceptable or unacceptable it was on a scale of 1 to 5. And so these are kind of color coded, showing, you know, the most unacceptable in red and acceptable in green. And so you can see that's done for 2 sections on the river, Hebgen Dam to Lions Bridge and Lions Bridge to Ennis Dam. Then in 2019, we did a scoping survey at the request of the Fish and Wildlife Commission. And basically this was asking for importance relative to the proposed management goal or acceptability on different alternatives on use of the river. This is kind of color coded the same way. That is, green shows acceptability, red shows unacceptability. The difference in the way these 2 charts are presented is the numbers on table 5 here show average values rather than put in quartiles like they were in table 4. But, you know, table 5 also asks people to respond, you know, on a scale of 1 to 5. So similar sort of grading, just presented a little bit differently. This information we used quite heavily in our analysis. This scoping survey also did ask some additional information that isn't presented in this chart, and that was every respondent was also asked how many days they did different kinds of activities on the river. And that was very useful to understand differences between residents, non-residents, and people who were not using the river, claim they were not using the river as much as they had before. So that's it for that part of it. Now let's start talking about the alternatives and our analysis here. I want to quickly go down. I don't want to make anyone dizzy here, but this might be helpful to you. You've got the rule notice itself to look at. Also, you should know that down here toward the end is table 8, which has a nice kind of quick summary of the management tools within each alternative. So it compares how the different alternatives address, you know, allocation cap, walkway, dress rotation, and so forth. So let's go back to the analysis here. So again, we looked at effects on recreational values, physical environment, heritage, resources, and economic resources. So I'm just going to briefly describe some of what we found in terms of our conclusions about how these different alternatives affected these different resource categories. We found that as far as the status quo effect on recreation, that quality would drop among most river users, and will probably include some displacement of users to other rivers as use is anticipated to increase. And we also anticipated that commercial use would increase by about 9.9% annually. With regard to the foam alternative, we predicted that commercial use would increase by 3.5% over 2019, based on their option to use either 2019 or 2020 outfitter numbers. So it would be a little bit higher than 2019 alone. We thought there's the potential that the allocation methodology proposed by foam could translate to a raised cost for a guided trip. The rescinding the number of days that there's a ban on fishing from a boat in the upper walk wade section could decrease wade fishing pressure there, and hence reduce what we considered to be a diversity of experiences, but it would likely increase boat use as well. The sportsman's alternative, sportsman's groups, GGTU, would not be not an increase in commercial use over 2019, since that's what they suggested. The non-commercial impacts would be similar to status quo, but like foam, they endorsed the use of a stamp, which would help us gain information that could potentially be used for regulation or restriction of non-commercial use at some point in the future if that was desired. The GGTU sportsman's petition, by proposing rest rotation sections, we thought that might draw some anglers back to the river. Our surveys suggested some anglers had quit fishing the Madison, and we thought those rested sections might draw some back. Boat anglers might go to the open walk wade sections that this petition has proposed. But overall, we think wade anglers would benefit from the combined rest rotation and walk wade regulations when they overlap. And boaters that are not taking advantage of this may experience more crowded conditions, especially if they stay in the Palisades to Varney section. With regard to physical degradation, status quo, we anticipated there was going to be an increase in physical degradation that is of pioneered trails, maybe stream banks that get worn down through use. We also expected that there would be catch and release impacts would be expected to rise, catch and release impacts of trout being caught in the river. With regard to, let's go and have status quo. With regard to the foam petition, physical impacts would be similar to status quo. They might actually improve in the upper walk wade section as wade anglers might go elsewhere as boats are allowed back in. That could lead to less catch and release mortality in that section. With regard to the sportsman's group petition, catch and release mortality in the rested sections may decrease, but may increase if other areas get more crowded. It's a little bit of a complicated thing to anticipate given their joint walkway restoration predictions. The effects on the heritage resources are really aimed at potentially on this river. It would be the result of us building out facilities for more users. Potentially it could be impacts on Native American artifacts or historic buildings or other historic artifacts that might be in the area. And basically what we thought was that the effect would be greatest from the status quo alternative and slightly less impact on both the foam and the GGTU, given that they are providing caps on the commercial activities. So that is some of the a small component of overall users. So that's why we said there would be a slight impact on the heritage resources. With regard to the economic impacts, I think it's important to point out that with regard to the status quo alternative, this first sentence is important to just emphasize we cannot confirm sustainable economic growth. We cannot confirm that because there's a lot of unknowns in the future. The short term, we do expect economic growth, and the tables up above do detail some of that growth that might be expected. The primary reason we don't think we can confirm sustainable economic growth is that as the use continues, there would probably be at some point some impact on the fishery, and that would probably lead overall to negative effects on users as well if there's a damaged fishery that wasn't as usable or people weren't enjoying as much. So with regard to that economic activity, that was it pretty much for the status quo. So the foam and the GGTU sportsman's alternative were basically evaluated relative to that. Although, like I say, status quo, we really couldn't put in any hard numbers on that. Foam alternative, basically, we thought there would be a lot of increase in commercial activity relative to 2019 because allowing the 2020 numbers in would give extra trips. The allowance of flex trips would also allow for greater economic activity, potentially over the cap, because flex are separate than the actual assigned guided trip numbers. The removal of the walkway boat restrictions, we thought, however, could have negative economic impact, as it would potentially drive some users away from the river. The sportsman's group GGTU alternative, commercial activity would not grow because it would be capped at 2019 numbers, so that wouldn't be as great as the foam alternative. There would be impacts from days where boats are allowed in the current walkway sections. So again, we'd say there would be some potential people leaving the river that are dissatisfied with that situation. On the other hand, we thought the rest rotation sections might serve to draw anglers back. So I think both a plus and the minus on this alternative. And then lastly, the primitive measures or restrictions on development in the primitive section below Gray Cliff would have a minimal effect on economic activity. So lastly, what we did then is, I'll take you down to the very end. We had the last part I'll talk about here is the alternative summary. and then how we kind of characterize that summary in color-coded table 9. Basically, the alternative summary, if I can find that here. Again, this was measured against how it helps achieve the goal. Status quo deemed to be risky for protecting health of the fishery as use increases. We thought short-term economic benefits might warrant a green rating, but due to the fisheries concern, we could only give it a neutral rating. And I'll show these as I talk about that on our color-coded table 9 here. So that's where status quo gets a red, not doing good for sustainable fisheries just because of the uncontrolled growth. And pretty neutral on the other 2 factors. The foam alternative does the most to provide a sustainable commercial sector as it locks in the highest use numbers. It gets a neutral on the fishery sustainability due to promoting the stamp, which of course the stamp is not doing anything other than collecting information at this point. But that's why we gave that a neutral, because it does give us the tools to consider addressing this issue. Gets a slight negative for diversifying angling opportunities by reducing the walk wade section over what it is now, the upper walk wade section. Again, did the best for sustaining economic benefits by basically locking in, assuring a certain number of commercial days. Sportsman's Group TU petition alternative did the same for the sustainability as foam alternative. They promoted the stamp as well. They did the best at diversifying angling opportunities because of their the novel way they combine both the rest rotation and the walk wade sections. And then they did sustain some economic benefits by locking in a certain number of commercial days at 2019 levels, not quite as high as the foam alternative. So, and then down below, we've got the management tools, just showing how we thought each of those did individually in terms of helping achieve the goals, and those are all got wrapped into the petitions in one way or another for our consideration. So that's pretty much it for the summary. I guess we'll
Hand it over to Jessica.
hand it over to Jessica here. How do I do that?
Can you help us?
I was muted the whole entire time. I apologize. Thank you, Don and Eileen, for that information. At this time, we're going to start the question and answer period. This portion is just to ask clarifying questions. If you are confused about what any of these documents are saying or proposing, no comment will be taken at this time. We want to make sure that we get your public comment appropriately documented. And so we're going to ask you to reserve your comments until the public comment portion. If you wish to ask a question and you are on your phone, you press *9 once to raise your hand. Kim will then unmute you one at a time. If you could please just tell us who you are, that would just help us know who we're talking to. Also, if you're calling from a cell phone, you may need to also unmute your phone after Kim unmutes you. I'm not sure if that's 100% accurate, but could be a possibility. And if you are also viewing this on YouTube while talking on your phone, I just ask that you mute your speakers to avoid an echo from the YouTube through your phone. So with that, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to press *9, raise your hand, and we will get your questions answered.
Hello, this is Ken Sine with Yellowstone Safari Company. Am I being heard? Am I in the right place?
I can hear you, sir. Thank you.
Excellent. So the question is, since at this point in time only asking questions, is there any indication of crowding or conflict from Gray Cliff to the confluence with the Jefferson, or from Milwaukee fishing access site to the confluence with the Jefferson?
Yeah, I can. We have not asked that. So I guess the simple question is that's not something we've tried to assess. As far as I know, we just haven't been hearing complaints of that.
Okay.
So I guess I would consider that basically something we just don't have a good answer for.
Sounds like no indication of conflict, though.
Correct.
Correct? Yeah, there you go. No indication. I appreciate that. Thank you. Someone else can ask a question.
Thank you, Ken.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, this is Doug Baranick, and I'm from Helena. I'm a wade fisherman. I've been wade fishing for over 30 years on the Madison. And my question is about the rest periods and why there's no rest period for the middle section of the river, of the upper river.
Hi, Doug, sorry, I didn't catch your last name, but just to quickly answer that question for you, the proposals were language straight out of the petitions that we received. So the petition from the George Grant chapter of TU and the sportsmen's groups, that's the one that addressed rest rotation. So we purely took the language from their petition, and that's what got put into the rule.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Was that everybody who had a question?
I do have one more person with a question, but it's being a little unruly. Phone number ending 678.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Justin Edge here from Ennis. I'm just wondering if Don and Eileen, if you could clarify a little bit more about the phrase diversity of angling opportunity and how you view opportunities amongst wade anglers, guided anglers, non-guided anglers, if all of those are considered equal and deserving of equal opportunity? Thank you.
Hi, Judge Justin. Thanks for that question. I think I understood the first part of your question. So basically, you were, if I understand you correctly, you're asking about the definition of diversity of angling opportunity. How we look at that is basically different opportunities for angling, whether it's from a boat, wade fishing, bank fishing, etc. So different types of angling. Could you say the second part of your question again, so as perhaps I can better understand that?
Sure, thanks, Eileen. Yeah, so if that's sort of the operating definition, does FWP in that definition consider wading anglers and floating anglers to have or to be deserving of equal opportunity?
Yeah, I think the easy way to answer your question is, we want to provide opportunities for all anglers. Obviously, with the Madison River having both wade angling and angling from boats, as well as using boats to access portions of the river.
Thank you.
Eileen, this is Jessica. We received a question via the chat function of the room from Bill, and I'm going to butcher his last name, and I apologize. It's DENRUYTER from NS. He would like to know, will the general public have to observe the rest and rotation?
Thank you, Jessica, for passing that question along. So the way rest rotation is worded, and again, this came from the petition from the George Grant chapter of Trout Unlimited and the sportsmen's groups. Basically, it sets aside days when days and sections. So a particular day, a particular section, when there cannot be commercial activity in that section. So it's more for an observance of the commercial anglers. So hopefully that answers the question.
We have a question from a caller ending in 389.
Yeah, good evening. This is John Malovich, Executive Director with the Madison River Foundation. My question is in regards to the proposed river use stamp, and wondering if it would be possible to evolve that particular rule or request to move into a river use permit or stamp that would be for the general public as well.
John,
Yes.
This sounds like a possible comment to the rules and alternative language. Would you mind reserving that until the public comment portion?
Sure, I was going to ask a question if it would be possible to do so.
Oh, I apologize for misinterpreting.
To adapt.
I'm sorry.
Correct. No, I would like to know if it would be possible under the current proposal to adapt the river stamp into a recreational permit for the river in the current rules, in the current language. and to carry that process forward.
Jessica, that sounds more like a legal question. I'm not sure if I'm comfortable taking that question.
Yes. You are, as a member of public commenting on this, are more than welcome to present alternative proposals to this.
Okay.
If the commission so chooses to entertain that, depending on how far outside the scope of the rulemaking language that's proposed and all of that, it may involve a separate process. But
Okay.
it is always of benefit to, this is why we have a public comment process, so that we can gain public input, even if that means alternative language to what's been proposed.
Okay, perfect. I appreciate the answer, and I will reserve the rest of the reasoning and the commenting for the next section. Thank you so much.
Hello, this is Ken with Yellowstone Safari Company again. Very simple question, at least I hope it is. Table 4 of the EA, which deals with locations of trips by commercial outfitters and guides in 2019. I'm wondering if that includes non-fishing operators who are SRP holders. And the reason I bring that up simply because outfitters and guides obviously pursue fish or game. And are permitted as such. So in our case, we're non-fishing. So I'm just wondering if my service has been included or my use has been included in that table. Did I come through okay?
Sorry, technical problems on our end. I think what we're going to do is defer that question to Cheryl Morris.
Yeah, she put the table together. Cheryl, can you answer that?
I sure can. Hi, Ken. Yes,
Hi.
all scenic operators were also included in that data.
Perfect. That answers the question. Thank you. It's a very important table to me. So thank you very much.
So it appears that somebody in the chat is having difficulties dialing in to raise their hand. So Jonathan, if you can hear me in that Q&A chat that we are in, if you could please type out your question, I will verbalize it and get it answered for you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Great. Sorry about that. My name's Jonathan Heems. I'm calling from West Yellowstone, and I'm just looking for clarification on the rest and rotation, specifically with lines to Palisades and how that would be currently defined. Does that mean that lines to Palisades would be closed on Sundays from A to B, or floating A to B would be closed? And what I mean by that is, if you close lines to Palisades, could we still float lines to Ruby? Could you float lines to McAtee? Could you float Pine Butte to Windy, Pine Butte to Palisades, lines to Windy, Windy to Ruby, Windy to McAtee, and Windy to Story? My question is really, if we close lines to Palisades, are we effectively closing these other 8 sections, or are we only closing the option of floating from point A to point B? Is that clear enough?
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I think we got that question. So I I'm just reading the language here from the rule. For everyone else that's following along, what Jonathan is asking about is new rule 2. So commercial use is prohibited from June 15th to September 30th as follows. So on Sundays from Lions Bridge Fishing Access Site to Palisades. I believe that's the section that you're asking for. So between June 15th and September 30th on Sundays, you would not be permissible to have commercial activity within that section from Lions Bridge to Palisades. And then on Saturdays, its commercial use is prohibited from Varney Bridge to Innis Fishing Access Site. And again, that's only between the period of June 15th and September 30th. Does that answer your question okay?
It does. I just wanted to acknowledge the fact and maybe just really ask for the record and have it be acknowledged that by closing Lions to Palisades, we are effectively closing down at least 8 other floating options for commercial users, which may very well have, you know, a different effect than what's intended by rest and rotation.
Are there any further questions for clarification on the rules or EA? Again, if you have a question, just press *9 on your phone.
Hello, this is Doug Baranek again from Helena. This is kind of a follow-up to the previous question. When we say it's closed to commercial activity, does that include float trips with fishing, without fishing, plus wade guided trips, i.e. any commercial endeavor is prohibited as opposed to just float fishing?
Doug, thank you for that clarification. The simple answer is on the days that commercial use is prohibited, in those particular sections, it is all commercial activity within that section on that particular day during the period. So I'm just going to read it again so as everyone knows what it is we're talking about, since it is causing some confusion. So it reads, again, new rule 2, rest rotation. Commercial use is prohibited June 15th to September 30th on Sundays from Lions Bridge Fishing Access Site to Palisades Day Use Area. And then on Saturdays from Varney Bridge Fishing Access Site to Innis Fishing Access Sites. And that's commercial use. So no commercial use during those days in those sections during that time period.
And I assume that shuttle services will still be allowed to use the fishing access points to pick up and drop people.
Doug, I'm going to pass that over to Dawn just to make sure I don't talk out of turn.
Yeah, I think the simple interpretation of that, Doug, is that no, they would not be allowed. That they are a commercial enterprise as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Oh, we just had one pop up.
Go ahead, Ken. Ken, did you have another question?
Any further questions? Can you have your hand raised to ask a question? You are unmuted if you have a question.
Oh, thank you. I was calling to clarify. So under new rule 3, walkway section, was proposed would limit watercraft or flotation devices to provide access to the walkway sections during 4 days, Monday through Thursday. But it will allow commercial fishing from boats in the walkway sections on 3 days, Friday through Sunday.
That's correct, Ken. Yep, you're reading that right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Nancy, we can.
Hi, it's Nancy Delecta. I'm just curious because I've gone through this whole process. On page 41, where you have the assessment of the 3 different alternatives, who are the parties that made the assessment and chose the values that belong in those columns? Was that Eileen and Don, or were there more parties involved? Who made those assessments? Because it is different comparatively from the rulemaking committee process and assessments there.
Hi, Nancy. Thanks for that question. That's a good question. So just so as everyone knows what Nancy's referring to, it's that color-coded chart that Don showed during his presentation, table 9, where basically it color codes the different management tools and their ability to meet the 3 management goals. Nancy, the easy way to answer your question is it was a determination done by the department. The narrative for that determination is in the EA. So as you're aware, it's a lengthy document. The table there sort of shows a summary, but all of the explanation as to how those determinations were made is in the narrative in the actual document. It wasn't one individual person. It wasn't just me or Don. It was collectively reviewed by several people within the department, and as our interpretation of how those tools would or wouldn't accomplish those goals.
There were no other outsiders involved in that process, just inside the department.
That's correct. The EA was done by the department.
Thank you.
One last call for questions. Oh, I saw another one just pop up. Disregard.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Is there a chance that float fishing access will go away in the walkway section, or the sections that are weight only that we are allowed to access via boat? Is there a chance that our access is going to get taken away?
I think, the petitions, just read them on their face, what they intend to do. I don't think there's any more intention other than what you see on the face of these petitions. These are the petition's opinions, not FWP's.
So I guess is that a yes or is that a no?
I guess the answer is we aren't proposing anything here. This is just the petitioner's proposals. So that's all we can address.
Is one of the, I guess to rephrase, one of the sections and one of the proposals was to eliminate float access through those sections. Is that correct?
Yeah, the walkway version of the Sportsman's GGTU, it does take the existing upper walkway section and divide it into days of the week where you can fish from a boat versus where you can't fish from a boat, but you can use the boat to access wade fishing. So I'm assuming that's the one you're referring to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Phone number ending in 678.
Hi, Justin Edge here in Ennis again. One more question about the observed decline in overall numbers of large brown trout in the Pine Butte section, I believe it was. In the 2018 annual survey report that was published, it was sort of acknowledged that the repairs to Hebgen Dam would alter the temperature regime. And one of the impacts of that temperature regime coming out of the dam would be an overall growth, slowing of growth for trout in that upper section. So in the end of that report, FWP acknowledged that they would assess whether or not, in fact, those regime changes in temperature were responsible for any limiting of growth. And I'm wondering if in fact they, you guys ever did that, what did you find? And just wanted to acknowledge that, FWP did in fact predict an overall decline in size of population. And what did you find, upon further inspection with that? Thanks.
Jeff, thanks for that question. We have Travis Horton, who is the Region 3 Fisheries Manager out of Bozeman, available to answer questions. He would be the best one to answer that question and was part of the staff who put that report together. So I will pass it along to Travis to answer your question.
Awesome. Thank you, Eileen.
Travis?
Yeah, hi, Justin. Thanks for the question. That was postulated that the warmer water coming through would increase productivity of invertebrates as well as consumption of those individual fish, and such that the individual fish might grow faster. It wasn't a population level presumed impact. In terms of the numbers that are out there, we wouldn't anticipate the numbers of fish to change beyond what those years were when the flows were increased or coming off the surface out of Hebgen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I believe so. Thank you. So to be clear, are you suggesting that, or how do I ask this? Is it possible that a reduction in overall water temperature coming out of Hebgen would be responsible, or at least partly responsible for any limiting size or growth of trout, the actual growth?
I guess my quick answer is no. You might have seen, again, we didn't document any actual change. It was a theory that you might see some bigger fish, they're growing quicker. If you look at the population numbers now in that Pine Butte Reach, we still have similar numbers of juveniles being produced every year than we've had for a period of time. The larger fish and the media, in my participation in the media, got this wrong, miscommunicated. It wasn't just the largest fish that have declined. It was all adult fish, which I'm classifying over 12 inches long. And so,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the previous condition or previous to the repairs being made, those conditions were more conducive to producing larger fish, you think, than now?
No, I think coming back again, the idea was that warmer water being released would increase productivity because it's just warmer for those invertebrates to grow quicker. And then consumption of those invertebrates could go up, which could result in a growth, like a condition improvement in trout. But like I said, if you go back previous to the issues where the surface water was coming off, that's what we'd expect it to go back to.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, this is Rich Gockel from Ennis. I just had a question for Don. On the rest in rotation, when Lyons to Palisades is closed to commercial use, if a non-commercial person puts in at Lyons, he can't pay someone to shuttle his trailer to Palisades? Is that what you said?
I'm going back to the rule here to make sure I understand. The way it's written, I would interpret it that way because it's refers to Lyons Bridge Fishing Access Site.
On Sundays.
Right, on Sundays. On that one day.
Okay, I mean, if that's what it is, that's what it is. I'm just trying to clarify.
Yeah, Rich, just so you know, we're just going off of what's in the petitions directly. The petitioners can always address that themselves at some future point, but we can't interpret it beyond how it was written up.
Okay.
Last call for any questions, *9 on your phone to raise your hand so we know you have one. Or if you are on your computer, you can also hit Alt-Y to raise your hand in a Zoom meeting.
Hello?
We can hear you, sir.
Okay, great. Just a general question. My name's Scott Johnson. I'm joining you from Missoula. I noticed that the FWP has sort of abdicated a policy decision to some interest groups here. And I wonder, like, as a citizen of Montana and someone who's a stakeholder as a recreationist, like, how much weight do these recommendations and these policy plans carry in the final decision? Because it seems to me like the science and the fishery health ought to be guiding it more than what sportsmen or outfitters think. And to the extent that FWP is acting as a trustee with the public trust of wildlife and fish, I hope that you will put the interests of citizens of Montana and our opportunity to hunt and fish, which is guaranteed by our Constitution.
Scott,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. This is Jessica, the hearings officer. This sounds more like a comment to me, and I just hope that we can capture this during the public comment process.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't want to waste your time. I'll
No,
enter a
you're
comment
not
in
wasting my
field.
time. I didn't mean to imply that at all. I apologize if that was perceived that way. I apologize.
Okay,
No,
so-
I just want to make sure that we get it on record in the appropriate spot so we can get it addressed.
Real quick question then. Is the FWP's policy to adopt one of the two of these proposals, or to sort of tailor its own based on other input as well? That's all.
Scott, I'll address that by explaining the process of what's happening here. So those two petitions were presented to the Fish and Wildlife Commission for rulemaking. The Fish and Wildlife Commission then took them up at their August commission meeting and voted to move forward with rulemaking. So in that regard, right now, what the department's responsibility is to assist the Fish and Wildlife Commission with that process. As you've heard us mention multiple times, the rule is written with the specific language that was in those two petitions. The department did author the environmental assessment where we tried to analyze the rule for impacts to the resources as we've discussed. The next stage in this, after the public comment period, the department will collate and summarize all of the public comment for the commission, which we will then present to the commission at a future meeting. And then the department will also make a recommendation to the commission. It is then up to the commission to decide what action to take. So I hope that helps to clarify the process for you.
Final call for questions.
Hi, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Hi, one more question for you, Justin Edge here, and then it's sort of a double question here, two-part question. On page 27 of the EA, FWB defined conflict as quote the interaction of wading anglers and boating anglers, I believe is what it was. And so I was hoping to get a more clearer definition of what exactly FW means by referring to conflicts. And second, is there or has there ever been a database or log sheet recording conflicts that have been reported to FWP? And just trying to find out more information about how those conflicts are recorded and if we are trying to resolve them independently or individually as they come in, or are we just taking the phone call and that's it? Thanks.
Justin, thanks for that question. I'm going to hand it to Dawn for the first part, and Cheryl Morris might help us with the second part.
Yeah, Justin, I'm looking at the part on page 27 that you're referring to, and Yeah, I mean, I think that's a legitimate question to ask. You know, our analysis here is basically just going off of the fact that we do hear through these surveys and input otherwise from weight anglers of some dissatisfaction of having that interaction with boats. But for sure, you know, that's just for analysis purposes. Maybe you could interpret that as a worst case scenario, any interaction being a conflict. But that is basically the way we looked at it. But that'd be an appropriate comment to make. With regard to the cataloging of those or taking those, yeah, I'll ask Cheryl to get on here. Yeah, there she is.
Yeah, hi, Justin. As far as when I get calls from folks, just in general, that they're dissatisfied with something, I hear a lot of the same things over and over. So those are the ones that'll stick with me the most. The only written ones we have are from past scoping surveys or public scoping or, you know, surveys or questions that we've officially asked that we have in writing from the public that they've sent us. And I have records of those for over 10 years. But as far as just people generally calling and stuff, I do not document that in writing anywhere.
Are there any further questions? We need to still get to the public comment process, so I am going to do a final call. If you have any questions, go ahead and hit that number, *9 again. And I see one just popped up, but if you are contemplating a question, go ahead and hit it. It takes a while for us to log over, so if we can get everybody kind of in a queue with questions, we can get them addressed. Thank you.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Cheryl, this is Julie Eaton. I was listening to that last response, and what do you have on record for the last 10 years specifically?
The public scoping surveys that we did.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Not individual.
Yeah, just things that we did officially to gain knowledge from how the public felt about what was occurring out on the Madison, or just if they saw any problem.
Sure.
With Madison.
I would add to that.
Okay.
I have.
Julie, I'd add to that. This is Travis Horton, that we
Hey,
commonly get comments explaining the conflict whenever we put out something for public comment. And those would be in a record somewhere.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I don't see anybody else having raised their hand since that last call, so I'm going to end the Q&A portion of the hearing and move on to public comment. One thing I do have to notify you of is that the legislative review of administrative rules is a function of the interim committees and the Environmental Quality Council, also known as the EQC. The EQC has administrative rule review, program evaluation, and monitoring functions for the Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. The EQC welcomes comments and invites members of the public to appear before them. And further information about the EQC can be found at leg.mt.gov. So I just wanted to make you aware of the legislative review of our rules. With that, I am going to open it up for public comment. Comments again, I just want to remind everybody, received will be considered for both the EA and the rulemaking proposal. They are not separated out by comments that way. The comments will help the commission make a reasoned and informed decision. So all these comments received will be given to the commission. If you wish to make a comment, again, press *9 once to raise your hand. Kim will unmute you. At that time, we do ask that you state and spell your name, please, for the record. If you are calling on a cell phone, again, you may have to unmute your phone after we unmute you. I have decided, just for time constraints and with the number of attendees with this hearing, there will be a 3-minute time limit. You will hear the alarm chime on my cell phone. I'll give you a couple of seconds to wrap it up, and then I will ask you to end your comment, and we will mute you again. If you did not get an opportunity to finish your comment at this time, you are more than welcome to submit the remainder of your comment in writing. Again, if you are not comfortable speaking at this hearing, you may provide your comment in writing. And again, written comment and comment provided here bear the same weight. So with that, I will open it up for public comment. Sorry, we just got notice that the person who's handling the unmuting and muting for us needs just a moment. So I apologize for that.
Caller ending in 299.
Yes, my name is Frank Horvath. I've fished the Madison River now for 28 years. I come up from Colorado and spend several weeks there. This year I spent 6 weeks fishing Madison.
I'm
this
sorry,
is in
sir, can I
regards
interrupt
to,
you for a moment? Could you please
Sure.
spell your last name for me, please? I'm sorry.
Certainly, it's H-O-R, V as in Victor, A, T as in Thomas, H.
Thank you. Sorry, please continue with your comment. I apologize for
Sure,
that.
sure. So I've fished the Madison River for 28 years, and I'm a wade fisherman, strictly a wade fisherman, and I fish from Quake Lake down to Lions Bridge. And I'm really unhappy about rule number 5, which would allow people to fish from boats because they disturb the fish. The other thing is that we only have a short section really to wade fish only, and they have people from boats can fish 40-some miles from Lions Bridge down toward Ennis. So we only have a short section which is suitable really for wade fishing. And the people coming down in boats can still fish the river. All they have to do is pull over. So I'm not sure why they would need to fish from the boat and potentially disturb our experience fishing the river. That's one comment. The other comment I'm less sure about, which is that landowners put up signs about fishing the river and how we can access the river. So as I understand, the rule was meant, the existing rule is meant to allow fishing as long as we walk along the river and not walk onto the landowner's land and trespass. So they argue with us as we try to access the river, strictly walking along the bank. And apparently the language is not clear enough as to where we can walk the land. So there are signs now that basically say, stay off my land, and you have to get in the water if you want to access the river. And it's not clear to me, and I talked to a number of people, it's not clear to us exactly how we can access the river. I think the spirit of the law or the regulation says that you should be able to just walk along the river without walking too far inland. Just walk right along the bank, and you should be able to fish. But the language, I think, says something about high water mark, and that's in dispute as to what the high water mark is. And at least it's confusing. So again, but the main part of my comment has to do with rule number 5, which I completely disagree with. I don't think that people should be fishing from boat in that section of the river. That's it.
Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, FWP members of the commission. My name is Andrew Gorder. Last name is Gorder. I'm here on behalf of Hellgate Hunters and Anglers, on which I serve on the board. We're a local all-volunteer rod and gun club based in Missoula. We represent over 300 local hunters and anglers throughout Southwest and Western Montana. And thanks again for the opportunity to comment here. Our members routinely wade, float, and fish the Madison River, and thus we have a keen interest in preserving this world-class fishery and the recreational experience that it provides. We've sent in a comment letter back in January, and our perspectives were essentially laid out there. And they haven't changed much from HHA's, Hellgate Hunters and Anglers perspective. Regulations on the Madison are long overdue. And we appreciate that the commission has initiated this rulemaking process on the petitions that it's received. I'll keep our comments short. We support the adoption of new rules 1 through 4, as well as new rule 16. I know there's probably a lot of people who are waiting to comment here, so thanks again for the opportunity to comment and for your overall efforts to protect the Madison River. I'll just add that, part of our interest here is whether we realize it or not, or it's intentional or not, this process is really probably going to serve as a precedent for similar regulation processes to play out on a number of rivers as Montana continues to grow and interest in our recreational opportunities continues to increase. So appreciate the commission taking these efforts seriously and the efforts to be guided by science and protect the resource. Again, we're in support of new rules 1 through 4, as well as new rule 16. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, this is Steve Lubeck with the George Grant Chapter Trout Unlimited, LUEBECK. We're going to be submitting written comments on every point in the proposed rule, so I'm not going to reiterate those here. I would like to clarify, though, that on a rest and rotation proposal, there was a question earlier about the effects on shuttle services, and it is not our intent to preclude shuttle services in those rest and rotation zones. I know that might freak some people out to think that shuttles couldn't operate at those launch access points, but that was not our intent to preclude shuttle services at the rest and rotation zone start and stop locations. And we asked FWP to clarify the language in the final rule so that that is not precluded. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm Nancy Delekta, Delekta. Thank you for this opportunity and for sharing with us over these years. I would hope to see in the ultimate final proposal a more balanced approach with more mutual goals and objectives of the at least two petitioners plus. And that would be different than the current recommendation, which is now not very different from what we've seen now multiple times, except for adding the Madison River stamp process, which I appreciate, but also see that will require quite a bit of oversight and possibly team effort to make the results work. Other comments are the length of time proposed on the restrictions is far too long at 3.5 months. That is too extreme, where this was suggested to be an example for other rivers as well. July and August might be a consideration. The river is not long enough for rest and rotation of these very long sections because the length of the sections, such as what Jonathan mentioned, causes a huge overcrowding of a bigger section. The river is not long enough. Banning the use of boats in the wade sections will not be as effective as intended. These sections are not busy enough to warrant this extreme position and will challenge those who cannot physically walk those sections, especially as proposed now over a 3-day period, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, meaning that individuals may not have time on their days off to actually access those sections if they can't walk them. A balanced approach would include less restriction and more opening of the river to boats. Fishing from boats will help protect reds better than walking on the pea gravel where the reds are. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, this is Doug Baranek from Helena. My last name is spelled Baranek. And thank you for this opportunity to comment. First comment that I'd like to make is currently the stretch from the South Madison to Varney, based on, I forget which slide it is here, it's table 4. Based on table 4, 54% of the usage occurs within that stretch. And it doesn't seem to make sense to me to close 2 other sections and force that traffic to all go down that most heavily used section, which will make it even more heavily used. So I think that if you're going to have a rest and rotation regime, then that should there should be a rest and rotation period for every section on the Madison, so that that any wade anglers or non-commercial anglers within those sections can also have the proposed potential in improved experience. Secondly, I would like to refer to some of your charts. And based on my reading of the charts, notably table 5, if you look for the number 1 complaint, the number 1 complaint is the number of people using boats to access the river to bank wade fish is too high. And the second part of Table 5 shows that the number one complaint is the number of people float fishing the river. What I think is important to, well, in my opinion, this complaint is not the number of trips. It's not just the number of boats. The complaint is how many boats come by for various points on the river. And really, it's how far those boats go. If a boat only floats 2 miles and another boat floats 4 miles, that 4-mile trip is twice as impactful on this number one complaint as the 2-mile float. So I think that this is important to recognize because it points to a potential solution where the outfitters would still be able to have the same number of trips. However, it would reduce the conflicts and it would reduce the number one complaint, which is too much boat traffic on the river. And in addition, there would be other benefits to this. And you could restrict that by saying, defining a stretch that would be fished from a certain put-in to a certain takeout. Obviously, this would have some coordination that would need to be done, and the outfitters would have to, and boat fishermen would have to coordinate in that way. So that'd be some burden on them. But I think that this is a good potential solution for a number of reasons. One, the guided fishermen would learn more about.
I was muted. Doug, I'm sorry. This is Jessica. I was muted and your 3 minutes is up. I apologize.
My 3 minutes is up. Okay.
Sorry, sir.
Thank you. That's fine. One final thing. I just think that the boats coming too close to the wade fishermen before they pull into the river, as expressed in a previous comment, is my number one complaint. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry that I was muted when that alarm went off. I apologize for that.
Hi, good evening. This is John Malovich with Madison River Foundation. My last name is Malov, as in Victor, Ich. So I wanted to address my earlier question about the stamp, the river use stamp, but at the same time establish the background of why that question comes up. Madison River Foundation has spent a lot of time and effort to go through the proposed rec plan, the petitions, and the EA, and rest and rotation and other proposed rules that are currently, they're designed to eliminate or reduce the conflict on the river. Madison River Foundation feels that there's, that this isn't really a complete view of the issues of overcrowding or conflict that are on the Madison. What we would like to see is a more complete view of this issue, along with the overall protection of the resource. And we feel that the idea of the river stamp is a good beginning of a more complete and holistic plan that Madison River Foundation, Madison Gallatin TU, and other groups would like to propose to help implement and to establish. And what we'd like to establish would be a recreational carrying capacity for the Madison River. That would include science and data to help to preserve, protect, and enhance the experience and the resource for all users. Along with that, it's also going to help to conserve it and protect it for the communities and the recreational users for years to come. So that's the basis of the idea behind the Madison River use stamp, and developing or morphing that into more of a user permit that would encompass not only from Reynolds or Lyons down to Ennis, but starting at the border of Yellowstone National Park and carrying all the way down to the confluence and the headwaters of the Missouri. Appreciate the committee and the commission for all the work and effort and extra time you put in on this. For those at GGTU and FOAM for your petitions and your efforts to protect and enhance this resource that we all love so dearly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Brian McKeon, McGeehan. I'm from Bozeman, and I'm also a fishing outfitter. I would like to specifically talk about my concerns for rest and rotation, which has been proposed as a solution to reduce the sense of crowding on the river. And my concerns are that will not actually happen. Currently, floating access is allowed on 56 miles of the upper river and additional mileage in the lower river. The GGTU petition proposes to reduce anybody that chooses to hire a guide on weekends, that they will be limited now to only 20 miles of the upper river. That's greater than a 65% reduction in their level of legal access if they're choosing to float simply because they've chosen to hire a guide. Furthermore, on rest rotation days, when the majority of commercial trips are in boats, are now compressed into only 20 miles, keep in mind that we need about 10 to 12 miles to operate a full day trip, which means that in that 20-mile zone, the lower section becomes somewhat unusable because it's too short to operate a trip. So all of the boats will be launching within about a 10-mile zone of river, where we currently now spread those launches out over those 56 miles. So anybody choosing to hire a guide is now penalized and will be extremely compressed and concentrated on a very small stretch of water. Furthermore, the fastest growing section of use on the river is non-commercial. It's, the dominant source of use, and it's growing extremely fast. And the rest and rotation does not actually set any limits on non-commercial use. It allows that segment of use to continue to grow at alarming rates. And we expect Bozeman to probably increase by 350% population over the next 50 years. We need to address that. Rest rotation does not address that. We need a plan that is more holistic, that allows a carrying capacity for the river, not just for commercial trips, but for non-commercial as well. That can be done by preserving resident access, by protecting a level and enhancing a level of the Montana resident in the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Nick EFTA. Last name is spelled E-F-T-A. I am a Ennis resident and was calling to comment on the standpoint of, we had someone mention earlier that this is going to set the precedence for a lot of other rivers around Montana. And I'm confused as to why we don't just look to our neighbors over with the Beaverhead and the Big Hole with how they go about limiting guide and outfitter access by closing a stretch of river, perhaps not as significant as those mentioned in the petitions that are mentioned here, but they limit that access while still allowing locals, Montana residents, to be able to still use and partake in those stretches of river. Also, growing up and floating the stretch of river from Ennis to Ennis Lake, in my opinion, it is completely inappropriate to take away access for people of the town, locals, Montana residents, and not be able to float those stretches of river for days of the week. Once again, completely inappropriate to consider limiting that public access. Thank you for your time. Appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Okay, thanks. This is Nick Givok, and I'm the Conservation Director for the Montana Wildlife Federation, and we will also be submitting written comments, but in general, we're supporting a lot of the measures in here that the two of our affiliates, the Anaconda Sportsman and PLWA submitted, or actually Anaconda Sportsman, just one of our affiliates, as well as the George Grant chapter of Trout Unlimited and the Skyline Sportsman Association submitted. So, but we would even suggest the Commission consider looking at 2015 uses levels of outfitting. We certainly do support some type of rest rotation proposal, revisions to the current walk and wade regulations on the upper river. We do support limiting development on the lower river. We would oppose any rule that would allow any expansion of commercial use beyond the 2019 levels and oppose the creation of flex trips. And also, we would support a proposal to reduce outfitter allocated use if the outfitter fails to use their allocation in any 3 consecutive years. So those are just some general comments, and we'll submit some more written ones. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
This is Rich Gockel from Ennis, Gockel. I think it's pretty well known that crowding is the major problem on the Madison River. And the recent EA came out with that same conclusion and cited a 2016 mail-in survey that found that for the wade anglers in the upper section, they were equally dissatisfied with the number of wade anglers and the number of boat anglers, and they're also dissatisfied with the number of recreational floaters. The EA then concludes that crowding is the issue, not how people actually access the section. And I'll quote their conclusion. Given that this group was just as unhappy with wade anglers as with the boat access anglers, this suggests that they are more unhappy with the number of anglers rather than their mode of transportation. The 22.8% dissatisfaction with non-angling boats supports the interpretation that crowding is an issue in this section. Because crowding is the major cause of dissatisfaction, then Rule 2 and Rule 3 make no sense because each makes crowding worse. Rule 2 forces anglers who hire a guide into shorter sections of the river, which increases crowding. And also, if I hire a guide, that should not make me a second-class citizen with fewer opportunities than someone without a guide. Rule 3 restricts boat access so that rather than having anglers spread out across the wade section, they're clustered around the access site, again increasing crowding. Rule 6 that limits commercial trips to 2019 or 2020 levels is a start in addressing the overall crowding issue. But commercial use is only 11% of total usage. So if only commercial use is capped, crowding will still be on the increase. Overall usage on the Madison is becoming unacceptable from a social standpoint. There's also indications that it may be unacceptable from a biological standpoint. The SWP should be tasked to scientifically determine the carrying capacity of the river and to develop an equitable method to allocate total usage. This should be the focus going forward and require a fair and transparent process to get public support. Implementing rules that favor one part of the public over another, or rules that limit access to only those with property on the river, will be counterproductive to establishing public trust in the process and should not be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Hello, Don and Eileen. This is Mark Odegaard. Hi, Julie. I have a few comments, and my comments are more
Sir,
general.
Could
Yes.
you please spell your last name for me, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Odegard. I was on the
Thank you.
negotiated rule-making committee, so everybody knows who I am. And I have some general comments, but to start, some qualifications. I've contributed significantly to 4 major environmental assessments in China, Mexico, Afghanistan, and at the Hanford site in Washington State, and on numerous smaller projects. So I have these comments. There is absolutely no assessment of the effects of climate change or global warming on any of the conclusions in the assessment. However, I would like to congratulate the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks and the Fish and Wildlife Commission on indirectly accepting global warming through their actions in the 14th July meeting. Second, there is no real economic analysis of the effects of the rules on the economies of the Madison River area. Third, the rules would apply only to commercial use of the river. This means that the use of the river will grow as it has by non-commercial use and will overwhelm the river. Rules should apply equally to all parties using the river. I would propose, instead of an absolute cap, a percentage cap based on the percentage use of the river. This will ensure continued economic growth, and the use on the river will diminish or be capped naturally. 4, there is no economic analysis of the benefits of these rules to those proposing the rules, as opposed to other affected parties. And I base this analysis on having been a city council member for the city of Chino Hills, California, as well as the vice chairman of the Planning Commission. My analysis is that capping the permits in the river are a taking of the value from the citizens of Montana. And for you people that don't know what a taking is in legal term, as a synonym to the legal terms, it means stealing. For wade sections and boats, disallowing boats to use the wade sections during certain periods so that disabled persons and persons of an elderly age like me restrict us. And I think this is a violation of the American Disabilities Act. Again,
Sir, that was the timer for your 3 minutes.
Okay. I have 2 more comments, but all of this is written and hopefully comment later. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Can you hear me?
You sure can.
Okay, my name is David Mckernan, MC, capital K, ER, NAN. I live in Anaconda, Montana. And first of all, I would like to thank the Anaconda Sportsmen, GGTU from Butte, and the Skyline Sportsmen for their effort in this endeavor. For without their foresight in taking this on, we wouldn't be here today. I mean, this would have just been swept under the rug. So I'd like to thank them. I agree with rules 1 through 4, and I also agree with rule 16. My granddaughter the other day, she asked me, she said, "Papa, if these rules are passed, would you take me to the Madison?" She says, "I hear it's a world-class fishery, but we don't go there." I said, "Sure, we'll do that. We'll stop in Ennis. We'll have dinner. We'll camp at the RV park there. We'll get out and enjoy the people of Ennis." So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. It appears that we only have 2 more people with their hand. Oh, I see a couple more going up. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Mike Cagle. I've been primarily wade fishing the Madison for the last 36 years, and my comments are with respect to what's being proposed in rules 2 and 3 and how it would affect Montana residents.
I'm sorry, could you spell your last name for the record, please?
Cagle.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruption. Thank you.
No problem. I would guess most Montana residents work during the week and fish on the weekends and gain access to the walk-wade sections by using their own boats. The changes in rules 2 and 3 would mean Montana residents would be denied being able to use their boats to gain access to the walk-wade areas on the weekends. I guess they could pay for an expensive float trip as another option, but it appears these 2 proposed changes would benefit the commercial users more than Montana residents. Thank you.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, just because I dislike interrupting people, if you could please make sure to state and spell your last name, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Sure can.
This is Eugene White, Whitee. I'm from Ennis. I'm an outfitter, and I grew up in Ennis, Montana. I'd like to start with potential restriction to the boat access in the wade sections. I think this would severely limit our heritage as a state. Is based around public access for people, and to disallow people to access large portions of the river by boat on certain days, regardless of commercial or recreational, I find repugnant to the public trust doctrine, which forms the basis of that heritage. Second, as an outfitter, I think it's easy for some of these special interest groups to point the finger at commercial users. However, the stats are clear that we're only a specific portion of the overall use and a smaller portion of the overall use growth in the last decade. And I do not think that limiting strictly commercial use is going to do enough to create the longevity for the fishery that is intended by some of these rules. Third, I think it is unfair to younger outfitters such as myself and many of my friends who have staked our lives and livelihoods on being able to create a business and live and prosper in the Madison Valley, with restricting us to 2019 or earlier usage dates. That would effectively kill many businesses of young outfitters who have not been able to establish the historical usage, but are planning to carry on our tradition in Ennis and the Madison Valley community as fishing tourism. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Justin Edge here, EDGE from Ennis, Montana. Also a young outfitter with the license beginning in 2019. Wanted to first start with the walk wade designation. I think that the from the outset, that designation of walk wade versus float angling, as far as I know, I think it's the only one in the state. I could be wrong about that, but I think that designation instantly has doomed FWP to solving any alleged conflicts from the outset. You know, we're all anglers. I'm a float angler. I'm a wade angler. I'm an outfitter. I'm all of them. And I think that once you start subdividing these user groups, you're just creating more problems by trying to make everyone happy. And so I think that to put things in perspective, float angling right now, as Brian McGeehan mentioned earlier, has 35% less opportunity, which is the third goal of this process. Opportunity is on the entire Upper Madison River than wade anglers. Wade anglers right now can get in at any public access opportunity on the river and walk wade anywhere they'd like within high water mark. Float anglers, however, only have 35% less of that, and even more restrictive with some of these rules. So if the goal is to diversify opportunity and all opportunity amongst all these sub-user groups are equal, it makes no sense to restrict one user group who's already restricted even further. And so if the goal, in fact, is truly to diversify angling opportunity, wade anglers, float anglers, the opposite should be the intent here, which would be to expand float water to those float anglers. I think it would help with conflict. It would help keep float anglers moving in those upper reaches where the wade anglers like to go. And I think that the wade anglers have this false sense of opportunity, like they only have that water up there, like Lions Quake, where they only have Ennis to Ennis Lake. But in fact, they could go to any number of public access points on the Upper Madison to walk wade. So that designation, I think, instantly creates issues. Second, commercial use. We represent, as many others have mentioned here, 15% of overall annual use, but we're being targeted for 100% of the regulations. And there's no indication that FWP will ever restrict the general public on the river. And so it seems completely unfair and really ineffective, ultimately, at addressing any issues of crowding or conflict by only addressing 15% of the annual use. Third, capping 2019-2020 is going to kill a lot of young outfitters' businesses, including mine. Third, there's some public access upriver between Lions and Quake. There's 75 acres of state land.
That was your time up alarm?
Okay. My last point was that there is 75 acres of public land upriver that will instantly be landlocked and privatized 3 days a week if the boat ban is put in place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Ken Sinay, S-I-N-A-Y, of Yellowstone Safari Company. Are we good?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. In relation to these new rules, I just want to mention a few points, and I, like many other entities, will submit written comments in a greater level of detail. But I want to mention that the overall reason on page 1 mentions, quote, heavily fished, and, quote, crowding, as well as the Commission foresees a need to address crowding continuing to be an issue on the Madison River. As you know, in relation to my question earlier tonight, there's no data that indicates crowding on certain portions of the Madison River. And the river from Gray Cliff to headwaters does not have any data which indicates crowding. In fact, available data indicates quite the opposite. In addition, it's important to note that all rule proposals are fishing related. Consequently, this statement is fundamentally incorrect. So in other words, It is not necessarily heavily fished or crowded on certain portions of the Madison River, and there is no indication of a overfishing impact on the fishery on certain portions of the Madison River. And of course, I'm obviously using the Great Cliff to Headwaters segment as an example of that. But at the same time, non-fishing SRP holders are not in the EA, are not even categorized by type of use. So for example, shuttle operators, vendors, or non-fishing river-based operators are not divided up in terms of where they're actually going. Now I realize they're a very small proportion of the total. There's 14 compared to something like 338 fishing outfitters, but they are impacted by these fishing-related rules. And I think it's important to consider a couple of other things. Fishing outfitters have a differing impact than non-fishing operators. So for example, it's a different activity, it has a different impact, it uses different sites and reaches of the rivers, and it results in different amounts and volume in those sites and reaches of rivers, and it even is utilized at a different time of year. So I think it's extremely important to recognize that restricting non-fishing is in direct conflict with the third goal of rationale, the goals of the EA and often cited rules. So in other words, number one, ensure the long-term health of the fishery. Number two, diversify angling opportunity. They have no application to non-fishing operators. Sustain the ecological and economic benefits of the river. These economic benefits can actually grow, and economic and ecological benefits may actually occur as a result of education, experience, and exposure. So this is very, very important, and there's no indication, nor is there any data that indicates a negative impact to these resources. And then finally, I'd like to mention a couple of other things. You know, in our case, we utilize the river. I really appreciate, by the way, Mr. There we go. I'll send it in writing. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Hello, this is Alex Leone, Alexleone, from Anaconda, Montana. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I just wanted to mention this is a pivotal time for the Madison and the rest of the state. We've seen a huge increase in youth over the last few years in the Madison, and this year I think was pretty extreme for all of us in the state at Fisherton. We saw a huge increase in youth. There's a need to address this issue, and I feel that the sportsman's proposal is the most balanced and the most fair proposal that's out there right now. We could study this issue forever, but we won't get anywhere. And I think that the Madison's one of the most studied rivers in the entire country when it comes to the fishery side and also the youth side. FWP has tons of data. They've done over a decade of studying, and it's time to do something. So again, I agree with the sportsman's proposal. I appreciate FWP and everyone else that's been involved in this process, and thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Carl Hamming, Hamming, and just want to also confirm you can hear me now.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I'd also like to add my support for the sportsman's petition, voicing similar sentiments as previously expressed. I think this is a compromise, and it's something that gets things going. You know, will it be perfect? Maybe not, but it's a starting place. It brings some regulations and control and balanced use to the river, and I think it's a great starting point, and I'm excited to see what results from it. I think it will bring a lot of positives that will be experienced by not only wade or float fishermen, but also commercial use, and I think benefit those in the long run once we take a more holistic view on it. So I'm a supporter of the sportsmen, and I thank FWP for bringing us to this point and hopefully finishing the process for rule implementation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, number ending in 562.
This is Kelly Gallup, Galloup. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for this meeting this evening. I'd just like to go over a couple things that I keep hearing from the beginning of this, actually, and it's about the social conflict and the conflict. I hear that over and over again. And as a fly shop owner and an outfitter in the Upper River, where probably 90% of the problems come from, I don't really see the conflict that everybody talks about from a guide perspective. And I'm a little curious. I don't like the fact that we don't have concrete data on that. And I'd like to see a data other than these surveys, because anybody that's taken a statistics class can tell you, if you ask the question, are there too many people on the river? Of course you're going to say yes. And if you say, would it be better if there was less? Well, yes, you would say that. I think if you went to Yellowstone National Park and surveyed the same question, you'd have the same response. But in the Upper River, what I see is more, and if you look at statistically, I think we only did less than guide-wise, less than 60 trips in the upper water. And another thing I think should be addressed is how dangerous that water is. It's kind of self-regulating. And so it's a little, I don't think it's going to be as big a problem, but like a lot of people have said earlier, we're 100% of the regulation and only 10 to 15% of the problem. And I really think we should really hardcore figure out what this conflict is, because just because people say, you know, they've seen conflicts, that's one thing, but, and you're obviously going to have, you can't fix people. There's just bad, there's good and bad. And so, but we're kind of targeted as the problem children here, and I don't think we are. And disagreeing with one of the past call-ins, I don't think this is fair and balanced at all, is that we're 100% of the regulation, less than 15% of the usage. And so I would really like to see us do some data, a little bit more data on this conflict, because right now it's all, if you ask me, it's mostly hearsay, because I don't see guides getting called in. As far as rest and rotation goes, I really would hate to see us base this on the Big Hole Beaverhead, is that the Big Hole Beaverhead's 140 some miles long, or the big holes where I'm talking about, but that plan. And this river essentially is 40 miles when you start looking at the float sections. And so you take 10 miles that away and condense all those people, the non-guided or the guided people, into those stretches, you're seriously going to see conflict then. And I think it'll be the opposite. When people find out guides can't go there, they're going to end up in those stretches where the guides can't go, and it'll probably double the usage in those zones. Who knows? But anyway, I appreciate all you're doing and all the work everybody's putting into this. Thank you.
Thank you. Justin Edge, it appears that you have raised your hand again. I'm going to have Kim unmute you, but you've already provided comments, so I didn't know if it was done in error or not.
No, I'd like to provide one more comment if that's possible.
We are limiting it to 3 minutes per commenter. I do welcome you to please submit any further comments in writing. Any further public comment? Again, it's *9 to raise your hand or Alt-Y on the keyboard, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, this is actually Helen Denryder, speaking with my husband here. That's Denruyter. And the first thing I want to say is, like, this was literally a conversation between us last night. My husband's been an outfitter. Just this year was his first year, and he's been guiding for almost 15 years in Montana. And we literally had to have the conversation last night. What happens if these rules go forward? Like, are we going to stay in Ennis, or do we need to move? Like, I work at the hospital here, and a number of us women all have husbands whose industry is on the river. I'm a 5th generation Montana girl, and my family started here in the 1800s. And this is kind of a big deal for us, personally and professionally. The other comment I wanted to say is that I've been here for 45 minutes listening since I got off work. And the number one comments that I'm hearing that are backed up by logic and reasoning and not just emotions are the fact that this feels like a gaslighting. The proposals put out like to ease conflict and increase diversity of use, and all of the rules put out seem to go against those exact things. And it just doesn't make any sense to limit the area if you're worried about conflict and crowding. That makes no sense. It doesn't even register in my mind why that would be an option. And I'm really also very disappointed, and there's no talk about the fish or the environment. Even in the environmental assessment, the data gathered about the harming of the fish, the erosion of banks, the decreased reds, I don't even know. It's not even there. So I would always approach this from an environmental perspective, and that just doesn't seem to be accounting for any of this. And so I think those are the biggest things that have us concerned. Obviously, my husband's business would die right away. That's also very frustrating. There's no incentive for kids growing up in Montana to even think that this would be an opportunity for them as work. If you can't buy into a multi-million-dollar business, and just growing up in Montana, there's not a lot of us who start here that end up with that opportunity. So I think it's really disheartening in terms of the fishing, and it's disheartening in terms of public access, and it's disheartening to see rules being made with no real good data to back them up. It's very frustrating. I know everyone's trying to take care of everybody else's opinions and everybody else's feelings, but that's not possible. And when you can't do that, I think you have to go back to the data, and the data is not there to back up these rules. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So this is the last call for public comment. If you wish to make public comment here at the hearing, please press *9 or Alt-Y on your computer. It'd be *9 on your phone, Alt-Y on your computer.
Phone number ending in 923.
Hello, my name is Craig Eggers. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, sir.
Excellent. I am a life member of TU.
I'm sorry. Could you please spell your name for me?
My bad.
You're okay.
My EGGERS. As I said earlier, I'm a life member of TU. I'm a resident of Ennis, Montana. I occasionally take my drift boat out on the river, and I also work with a lot of the local guides and shops. If crowding is really the issue that we're trying to address here,
then I feel that the sportsman's proposal is almost a red herring, because as a result of compressing the commercial access to the river on critical weekend days, I would suggest that FWP will be back here a couple of years from now fielding complaints of even more crowding and even more pressure. And speaking to one of the walk waiters who commented earlier, given some of the conflicts that he brought up that are starting to develop between landowners and the walk waiters, I don't see how the current proposals really benefit access for the walk waiters. Short of owning property adjacent to the river, I don't see how access to the river, for me, is going to be expanded. And finally, I did note one elderly gentleman who made a very, very good point, which is access to walkway areas, prevents people from stepping on the reds, destroying reds, but importantly, provides more access to senior citizens, disabled people who want to take advantage of this great resource. Those are my comments. I appreciate all the work that you've been trying to do. And just as a private citizen, I am a little concerned about the farm proposal. I would hate to see a day when living here in Ennis and having a drift boat and doing walkways that my access would be prohibited because I wasn't able to get a stamp. So please take that into consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, final call for public comment. Final call. Justin, did you need to add something? Kim, would you please unmute Justin? So he raised his hand again.
I am trying. Oh,
Yes.
Go ahead, Justin.
Yes, I just wanted to comment. I'm pretty sure I heard Don Scar earlier say that the last, the most preliminary report from 2019 said that 173,000 user days were reported in 2019, and that was a slight decrease. But however, if I do the math right, that's a 16% decrease in numbers. And I just wanted to clarify that for the record, that there was a decrease in 2019 of about 16% of use.
Thank you. Seeing no further comment, I am going to close the public comment portion of this hearing. I would like to thank everybody for taking the time this evening to attend this hearing and participating in this public process. You all were very respectful, and I thank you, and you were all very patient while we did this technological endeavor. Public comment does not end until October 30th. So if you did not get to finish your comment, or you think of something between now and then, you may submit your comment, but it must be received no later than October 30th. At this time, the commission is scheduled to make a decision regarding these rules and environmental assessment at their meeting, which is currently scheduled for November 18th. The agenda for the meeting will be posted on FWP's website a few weeks before that meeting. Once the commission makes a final decision, that decision will be posted on Fish, Wildlife, and Parks and the Secretary of State's websites pursuant to the administrative rules scheduling set by the Secretary of State. I thank you again so much for attending this evening and for all of your comments. And I hope you have an excellent evening. Thank you.